All right, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you happen to be, and welcome to the Signum University Roundtable. And I wanted to kind of invent some walk-in music, like maybe something triumphant, or and all I could think of, were Norsemen going to war. And so I didn't actually launch that. I'm not sure that's the vision we have for the College for the Fall, exactly, College for the Fall or not. But I welcome all you. It's great to see so many people here in the attending this. You're going to get a taste of the courses that we have coming up from the fall. So this could be great if you happen to be one of the students that are signed up. If you're sitting on the fence between courses, you should of course take mine, or you can take any of these choices. And then of course, if you are tuning in either live now or in the video on the Signum University YouTube page, this may be the chance for you to choose and launch your Signum first class. So, and it's a great semester to do that. Although I tend to change my career in my heart every August, November, and April as the class lists come up, and I want to launch into a new career. I'm convinced I will learn Old Norse and Old Icelandic and everything, and change my life. So people are always telling me to change my life. Maybe I should do it academically. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give a little introduction to our panelists for today, who are part of the teaching team, but not all the teaching team that we have today. And I'm going to also just share a little screen here, and we're going to get to know them for a few minutes. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and introduce the courses. We're going to take questions as we go, and so I hope that you can populate the question box there. That'd be great. All right, now, so this, shall we begin? We'll begin in the order that we're going to talk about the classes. So let's begin with, I guess myself, I'm one of Maggie Park and I are part of the Folkloric Transformation team for the fall. And I am a lecturer and preceptor here at Signum, and I curate the blog at pilgriminarnia.com. Maggie Park earned her PhD in film and digital media from Bangor University. Do we say Bangor? No.
Bangor, rhymes with hanger.
Yeah, Bangor University in Wales, with her specialty in creative industries. And if you actually take a look at her webpage on Signum, you can actually see a great number of the things that she is active in. So give us a little wave, Maggie. Make sure your mic's working. Good stuff.
Hi.
All right, good. And then we have Sarah Brown, Dr. Sarah Brown, and we have John Garth that are here for a new class that we have on Tolkien's Worlds. Sarah is a lecturer preceptor within language and literature faculty, really one of our longest term, not our oldest, our longest term serving teachers. Yeah, super careful, because she's also my boss in the MA thesis coordination program, and really in all other ways, because she's a chair and all these great things. Really important Tolkien scholarship work too as well, and that's one of the reasons that she's working with John Garth on a new class on Tolkien's Worlds. John, this is, I think, your second full class with us at Signum University. Is that right, John? But also have done a handful of lectures here and there. Also does some popular writing, because he has worked himself into the space of being one of the preeminent Tolkien historians, which is an important disciplinary distinctive to think in that sort of way, but who also is able to tackle the breadth of linguistic beauty, the depth of the myth, and all those kind of contextual realities that have to do with Tolkien. And so not everybody could do this. We loved his great war class, and we're really looking forward to this, both based on books. Of course, Tolkien in the Great War, the award-winning and influential text, which I still love, and then the Worlds of J.R.R. Tolkien, which is actually on my desk right now because it's the biggest book we have for the semester, so it's holding up my microphone. It's the only one that was large enough physically to hold it up. Can you hold it up, Sarah, there, just so that
so many uses.
So many uses. But beyond that, it's actually really beautiful and helpful. If you could actually, you could strip out the text, and you would have a good book, and you would still have a good book.
Well put.
Yeah, no, but to be fair, not every coffee table.
I get that comment a lot myself.
Yeah, but not every. You can strip out a lot of things in my work. Not every coffee table book is still a book when you take out the beauty of the design, and then this also has the beautiful design, which is pretty cool. All right, okay, and then now we have Nelson Goring, who's waving at us there in his angelic glow. He is one of our lecturers and preceptors. Is it Accouche Mountains in Wisconsin? What is that?
No, Accouche Mountains. It's a little spot that the glaciers didn't go, so we have a few little bumps and hills, and we grandiosely dubbed these mountains.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. And you're going to be teaching our Chaucer class, is that right, this semester? Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, and he's got a DPhil in comparative philology, general linguistics from Oxford. That's where one gets a DPhil. And of course, he's part of this great Germanic linguistic kind of line that we have at Signum University. I think really a global leading bits of work that are being done, not just in the teaching, but within the faculty. And so we also have an Eddic Poetry class that's being offered by Professor Carl Edlund Anderson with a AB in Folklore and Myth from Harvard College and a PhD from the Department of Anglo-Saxon, Norse, and Celtic at the University of Cambridge. And I would encourage you also to check out his page. And I think most of us also have writings and public talks that you can find through our various web pages and social media accounts. Okay, so welcome to the team. Welcome everyone. Now I want to ask a question. So it's just to warm up, and then we'll get into your courses. Okay, I want you to think of 3 scenarios. What's on your bedside table for books? I mean, I should be really clear about this. What's on your bedside table? What's on your desk? And what's in your earbuds or AirPods or whatever device that you use to listen on your FM receiver in your car radio? So basically, what's the book that you're reading just for fun? What's a book that you're really working on as an academic text? And then what are you listening to for whatever reason? So let's begin. Let's go ahead and begin with Maggie. Do you want to answer that for us?
Sure. Bedside Table is the new Hunger Games prequel, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Kind of getting my head back in some YA event film adaptation stuff, and that's come out just a few weeks ago. So that's enjoyable, but a bit fun and light, but still looking at it with a bit of a brain. My desk doesn't have a book on it at the moment, but it has a boatload of Post-its where I'm writing down book titles. I'm putting together a book proposal, so I'm doing a bit of a general lit review of what I need to read before I put together my own work. So that's that one. And then in my ears, I go on a lot of walks around here and like to have something that makes me think while I'm moving. And I've been doing Me and White Supremacy to just kind of do my own work in what's happening in the world and look a little internally at how I can help externally. So that's been really fun to do with 3 friends. So we've been kind of going through the workbook together on that one. So yeah, that's what I'm up to.
Beautiful, beautiful. Nelson, what about yourself? On your bedside table? Oh, this may be a lounge chair. You can read anywhere. I'm not judging. On your desk and in your ear, yeah.
Well, on my bedside table, I'm reading The Shadowed Sun by N.K. Jemisin, which is a very excellent sort of Egyptian-flavored fantasy. Of course, Jemisin is great in general. Yeah. I don't have one single book. I've got a whole bunch of books piled around right now because I'm trying to put together a book proposal of my own. So that's been sort of, yeah, eating up all my emptying off my shelves and piling up on my desk and the couch and everything. And then for what's in my ear, I've been listening while like doing the dishes and things like that. I've been listening to the Chinese History podcast, which is just something completely different from what I normally do.
Beautiful, beautiful, excellent, thank you. Now, what about you, Carl? What are on your desk and bedside table and in your ear?
Well, on the bedside table, it's not really me. I have a 10-year-old daughter who has been working her way through Harry Potter, and I've been reading her Lord of the Rings. as well, and she's been occasionally exclaiming in both cases, "Hey, the book is different from the movie," and so an important discovery as she goes along there. But she's been reading on her own, I've been reading to her, etc. And that's because I haven't really had the time to do a lot of reading myself. On the desk, carefully out of sight, or out of shot, I have a lot of stuff related to Eddic poetry, partially because we're updating some of the materials for the upcoming course, myself and Paul Peterson, who's also precepting in the course, but also because I promised to give a plenary presentation to an online conference organized by some people in Brazil on like the mythological geography of Norse myth, something like that. And I have to actually come up with something to say by October for that. So going back and forth there.
That's a shocking reality of committing to something, right?
Yeah, I know. But hey, it's in October and I've already, at least written the title down on a file. So it's a good start.
That's good. I currently don't believe that October exists. Sorry, and then your earbud or your
Oh, I don't have anything particular. I listen to a lot of audio production podcasts. I'm an amateur home musician, and so I'm always listening to people chat about things. And I don't always learn something from it, but it's very soothing sometimes, and I fall asleep.
Good. Well, that's great. Actually, I would buy a night's sleep just right now. So it's super warm where I live, and it's not supposed to be. Like it's cheap.
You can all come here. It's not warm at all.
Well, it's great for beach lovers though. Like if we could have tourists, it would be a great summer. So, Sarah Brown, what's on your bedside table? What's on your desk? And what's in your ears?
Okay, so on my bedside table, and I've actually almost finished it, is a book called The Extraordinaries by T.J. Klune. And if you haven't read any T.J. Klune, I highly recommend him. Absolutely wonderful. This one is like a young adult book, actually, and it's about these kids in their late teens. And the extraordinaries are what he calls the super queeros. They are. It's exploring sexuality, but it's also exploring the idea of being more than you are, and do we really need to be that way, and all that kind of thing. And the main hero, who's like a 16-year-old kid, is neuroatypical, and it's a fantastic read. It's absolutely wonderful. So that's that. On my desk is this, and it's literally on my desk because obviously I'm preparing for John's class, which is starting very soon. So I'm on my third read through of this now, because obviously I'm making notes for when we get to the classes. So that's that. And in my earbuds, okay, I'm currently listening to on the BBC Sounds app a wonderful podcast called You're Dead to Me, which is history. It's a really funny but interesting and really well done podcast about history. So I think it's in its second or third series, something like that, but it's absolutely brilliant.
Beautiful. Excellent. Gorgeous. All right. And John, what's on your bedside table, on your work table, and in your ears?
The book I'm trying to read for relaxation is The Ancestor's Tale by Richard Dawkins, which takes the structure of the Canterbury Tales and applies it to a backwards history of evolution. So from us back to the beginnings. And that's a mixture of very challenging and hugely enjoyable. The stuff that's on my desk, well, it's all to do with landscape and culture and so on. I pulled out all the books that will provide me with some extra stimulus and refresh my excitement about the subject for the course while I'm teaching it. And I'm listening to a bit of Robert Macfarlane, who writes fantastic landscape writing, The Old Ways, and Underland, his latest book, which is about caves and so on. But when I really need to switch off and not think about the subject I'm going to be teaching. I'm listening to Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things.
Wow, gorgeous, excellent. All right, I guess for myself, I am on my bedside table. I'm finishing up Octavia Butler's Blood. Oh, geez, I just lost the name. Somebody will write it in here. The short stories collection, starting with the Blood one, and part of that was I'm supervising a thesis, and I read through all of Octavia Butler's stuff, but I laced her stories out just kind of throughout between the books, and then but I'm also doing this vampire class, or part vampire class, and Octavia Butler's stuff just tends to be vampiric in one way or another. And then I can't believe I lost that. On my desk is a book by a Canadian historian called Max Hammond, who I have taught with. It's a book called The Audacity of His Enterprise, Louis Riel and the Métis Nation That Canada Never Was. And so it's about rethinking an Indigenous perspective in Canada. And Riel is a family name, actually, for some ideological reason in the past. So I'm just interested, and it won a Transnational History Award, which is kind of cool. And near my earbuds, I got in trouble. I downloaded like a free book with like one of these audiobook programs online, and it was a Vampire Archives, just to kind of get myself ready. It's got kind of it's a collection of a whole bunch of readers, and a bunch of past writings and some newer ones. It turns out it's a 70-hour audio book, so I didn't realize I started into it, and I wondered, like, these stories are really long. They're each taking like an hour or two for the person to read, and then, oh wow, this is a mammoth book, 60 or 70 hours. And so I'm not sure how far I'll get, but I'm kind of doing the Victorian ones and seeing where it goes. So anyway, those are my three. Although I'm going camping next week, so there'll be something just a paper book, probably with some Greek numbers in the title or something. So, all right. Okay, let's go to the classes. And so we're going to briefly basically pitch and describe the class. And so let's go ahead and begin with, can we begin with the class on, sorry, I was having a tech issue here. There we go. Okay, let's begin. So we have these 4 classes that we want to discuss. And we're going to begin with Folkloric Transformations, which is Big Bad Wolves and Vampires, a class that I'm part of the team. But Maggie, could you give us just a quick sense of that class, and we'll go from there?
Sure. I think what excited me the most was that this is looking at things that most of us will be familiar with. This is popular literature in a way that you wouldn't have thought about it necessarily. So we're looking at the folklore traditions that inspired the text that we're more familiar with now. So when you see the title, you're like, okay, folklore, yeah, it's probably some fairy tales. No, we're looking at Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We're looking at I Am Legend. We're looking at Interview with a Vampire. So personally, I'm really pumped about this. If you know me, you know my PhD case study was Twilight. Don't judge me. So I'm really excited to have some other vampiric work come into the world. But my big thing is looking at adaptation and how people reimagine literature. And I just finished teaching Dimitra Fehmi's modern fantasy course. And the way she presents information lets you really sink your teeth into it, but also keeps it at a really level playing field. So she gives you the information in a way that you can see how it applies to literature that you grew up with, that you absolutely love, but you're getting this whole new angle on it. So yeah, I'm really pumped about it. And I just think the reading list and the things that we're going to be looking at are excellent. It'll be good fun.
Yeah, Dimitra Fehmi is great at application, or method than application, right?
Yes.
So it's a folklore method class in that sense, but the application is in really contemporary pop culture moments. In this case, vampires in the first half, big bad wolves in the second. You mentioned adaptation, and the second half is a different kind of course, right? Like it kind of moves and really kind of has a number of things. What of the stories in the second half are you kind of looking forward to digging into? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
or films. There's films in the class. There's films and games and stories and pop culture moments. So it's not just a reading course. But sorry, Maggie, go ahead.
That's all right. I like that we're getting excited. That's all right. I mean, I'm new to this course, so I'm going to be doing the lectures along with my students. But in terms of the reading list and what we're going into, and just knowing what Dimitri Fimi brings into a lecture, exactly like you said, you're going to get pretty high level academic ability and skill and grounding, but through this lens of things that are really fun and accessible. And I really love it when we can bring some credibility to popular culture and things like that, because people just dismiss it, and there's no need for that. There's absolutely no need for that. So being able to look at something like Roald Dahl, being able to look at Buffy the Vampire Slayer and really dissect it for the genius that it takes to create something as popular and well received as that, but also as smart and well constructed. So I really love adaptation purely for the imagination behind it. You take something and you reimagine it. I love that. But the ability to bring in that academic structure and that kind of framework to look at something, just really good fun. So yeah.
No, and actually I think like the Buffy lecture, I think in the first couple of episodes of season 5 is actually one of my favorite lectures, like of history. So not just of this course, but of any lecture that I've seen. And so I think you're right there. And I was like blown away by I think it was a couple of the films, Let the Right One In, which
so
is just like disturbing on great levels. After so much kind of, horror that's at the B level, to have something elevated like that. And then the film Freeway with Legally Blonde, Reese Witherspoon, is that who the actress is? It's just just like, wow, it's a great adaptation of the Little Red Riding Hood story. It's a complete new, fresh adaptation. Gabriel says here. Sorry, go ahead, Maggie. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, I just finished teaching World Cinema course, and Let the Right One In was one of the films on that. So I've been looking at it with such a filmic mindset that I hope I can bring some of that into my classes. But I'm really looking forward to seeing the literature side of it. So not the film imagery visuals, but the actual content.
Yeah. Well, and if you read, like we have Richard Matheson, Anne Rice, and Bram Stoker on the list. Each of those they're very literary books. Interview with the Vampire is a very literary book, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein behind it is as well. Like, so there's a literary stream, which is beautiful. Gabriel says here that I love the reading list. Really cool to have a video game. Is this the only? Is this unique to Signum to have a video game assigned in a course? I don't know. Does anyone know? Like, I think Lotro, I guess, gets looped in from time to time. Is that right?
I've definitely done some suggested games in my courses, but I don't think it's been required material for anything yet.
Beautiful. Okay, good. And any other questions there from the panelists or from the audience? We'll take those, and they can come in throughout the hour, but we'll move on here in a moment to the next class. I'm still not quite sure, Maggie, how to take Polidori's The Vampire. I'm still on the fence about whether this is like, cutting edge and engaging, or campy, and awful. I go back and forth. It only takes, I don't know, an hour or two to read. It's not a long story, but
That's still okay. I like it when things make you a little, I don't know where that falls. Like we should be okay with that kind of strain on it. And it's nice to look at these things from different lenses. And again, like, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but like having something like Buffy the Vampire Slayer on the syllabus and saying, think what you want about that. Or every time I talk about, my case study of Twilight, like, think about what you want about that, but I'm going to break it down. Like, we're going to have fun with this and dig into it. And yeah, so I think the discussion around it, especially if you don't know where that falls in, that's probably more interesting, as interesting as the text. I would never say more interesting.
You're right, yeah. And I would encourage people, if you're going to watch Buffy for the class, not to wait for all 7 episodes for that lecture that week. That might be just too much Buffy.
That's a lot.
For one day or 1 week. So, although physically possible, I'm sure, in some universe, and the Doctor Who universe for one. And I like how John Polidori spells vampire with a Y, I've started spelling my name with a Y just to kind of have that kind of classic feel there. Good. All right, let's actually move to John Garth and Sarah Brown on the next piece, which is our conversation about the Tolkien's World class. There we go. Good stuff. Now, what's the name of the book and what's the name of the class? Let's John, will you just clarify that with us, because we don't often do this with a class poster, which is hold a book up against
some German friends of mine, the key figures in the German Tolkien Society, took my book up to the top of a mountain and photographed it against the Alps, which was very lovely of them. So the course is the same title as the book, and anyone who has the book and has opened it to the contents page will see that the schedule is suspiciously like the contents page. So the book will basically structure the course. Now, I promise you, I'm not gonna simply open the book and read each chapter, week by week. The book was an intense piece of research and ended up being about twice as long as the publisher actually wanted, and there was still more that I really wanted to get in there. There's a lot that's only touched on very lightly, where I put a great deal more thought into it. So I'm hoping that there will be plenty of material that I can add to what's in the book. There will be things in the book that I want to unpack more off the top of my head. I talk about the influence on Tolkien of the book In Northern Mists by Fridtjof Nansen, the Norwegian explorer, who wrote this massive 2-volume history of Arctic exploration, in which he talks about Vinland, the Norse settlements in the New World. Because he brings in a great deal of history, he brings in a great deal of folklore and myth. And Tolkien knew this book, and he did respond to it. We know he responded to it. I want to explore the relationship between that book and Tolkien's ideas of the geography of the Great Sea and of Valinor and the Lonely Isle. So that's just one point that I'd like to expand more. There are topics that I didn't even cover in the book that maybe we'll talk about, other worlds. So Tolkien describes other planets in the Notion Club papers. I want to talk about maps as adjuncts to world building and as doorways for readers to enter into fictional worlds. I'll bring in analogues from other authors that we know and love. C.S. Lewis, perhaps, obviously, Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea books, various books familiar to British readers of a certain age, such as Alan Garner's and Susan Cooper's fantasies. So we'll be expanding outwards in that direction. But also we want to give it some kind of academic rigor. I wrote my book as a book for the general intelligent Tolkien fan. It's not an academic book, though I've tried to make it well sourced. We need to talk about Tolkien's theories of literary creation, subcreation, secondary worlds, what he meant by allegory and feigned history. And there's a great little finding of mine, I'm very proud of this little finding of mine, about the inspiration for the elf towers west of the Shire and how that relates to Tolkien's famous lecture, Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics. And I want to talk about how the tower in the lecture is allegorical, and essentially the same tower in the Lord of the Rings is not allegorical. Yeah. Is biographical criticism valid? Is source criticism of the kind I practice in this book valid? How do you do it well? What does it add to an understanding and appreciation of the book you're reading? I want to I want to try to share with students some of my research techniques. So show them how I investigate things that I'm curious about, how I validate, how I try and prove things, how I conclude that something is not worth investigating any further, that kind of thing. So there are various examples that I'll unpack and talk about online resources in particular, I think, because those are ones that we can all access from our desks. And it will be a visually rich course, I think, with plenty of extra photographs and maps and artwork and so on.
Good. Okay, thank you. Excellent. Yeah, and I apologize. I have some things flashing on my screen, so I'm going to just make an adjustment here. My apps have to tell me every minute of the day what's happening. So John, it sounds like what we've got in this book or in this class is some of the highlights of the book, the structure of the book, which made sense as you wrote it, so it makes sense as a class, but also a couple of other things allow students to kind of walk alongside you in the way that you discover these things, but then a little bit of a peek behind the veil when it comes to some paths that weren't followed. Is that a fair kind of assessment of what you're talking about?
I guess so. I mean, and fundamentally, the point of the course is to walk on the path Tolkien walked, to try to put yourself in his shoes. It's all about the way creativity works, seen through this prime example of a creative genius.
Yeah, and it just resonated in all these words. So Sarah, you teach our Tolkien context class, and I know that you've held up the book a number of times, so I believe that
I can do it again.
You can do it again. I believe you own it, and I'm sure you're excited, as with the others in the teaching team, to sign up for this class. Kate Neville here says, "Oh, I'm super happy. I'm even hearing this, I'm even happier that I signed up for this class." So what is it, maybe one of the sections or one of the themes, what is something that you're really looking into kind of diving deep? For those who are don't know exactly how this happens, we offer kind of expert lecture series once or twice a week, or expert tutorials, and then they move into smaller group discussions or applications through tutorials. And so Sarah will be doing these small group discussions, the preceptor sessions. What is it, something that you're looking at really kind of highlighting in this piece?
Okay, well, let's take it back to something that John mentioned just a few minutes ago, which is to what extent is biographical criticism valid? Tolkien himself, of course, vacillated between "it's dreadful, don't do it," and "yeah, whatever, if you want to," because that was Tolkien, right? He kept changing his mind about certain things, but it's where I started my Tolkien and context course from. That was the beginning point there, is, okay, biographical criticism, what's the point of it? Does it really add anything? So I really loved exploring Tolkien contextually, and this is a contextual area that I didn't really explore because it's nowhere near my wheelhouse. So one of the things I'm really looking forward to, and it's John himself who's got me fired up about this, is maps, and looking at the way in which maps can really add to our reading and understanding of a text and provide a whole different gateway into the text. So I'm really looking forward to that. He's recommended some extra books for me to read, and yes, I purchased them straight away, and yes, they've already arrived, and yes, they're also on my desk. And there's some wonderful, wonderful books that are on the reading list, which we've just put out for people who are interested. And that's one of the areas I'm really, really looking forward to exploring, because I have never really explored that sort of thing before. So I'm looking forward to something new for me as well. It pushes my nerd buttons, put it that way.
Yeah, one of the I remember picking up for Nicholas at Wheaton College Lord of the Rings at the Wade Center, a Lord of the Rings kind of Middle Earth map, and then a Narnia, the colored Narnia map. But the Middle Earth map was like kind of the fake, kind of looked like you know, it was like on vellum or something. It had this kind of fake brown color. It was great. When he was little, it was a perfect thing. Now I want to actually go into a little more detail in this particular reproduction can do. So love this. I love maps. We're going to take your questions here for Sarah and John as they offer this class, and then we're also going to move forward now and go ahead. I'm just going to advance this here and go ahead and talk about Chaucer. I mean, when do we not talk about Chaucer? I mean, isn't that the question? This is Chaucer I, Visions of Love. Okay, can you give us a sense of this here, please, Nelson?
Yeah, sure thing. So in case you don't know who Chaucer is, he's one of the preeminent late Middle English poets, active in the late 1300s. In some ways, he is Middle English for a lot of people. I sort of cringe a little when I say that because there's a lot of other Middle English out there that I also love. But he's really an outstanding Middle English poet. And this class will focus. This is one of two classes we offer on Chaucer. The second one, the follow-up to this, is on the Canterbury Tales, probably his best known work. This is sort of on almost everything else, basically. So it's Visions of Love. A number of these poems are dream visions, often dealing with the theme of love, along with fate and grief and all sorts of other things. And then, as you can see, a whole lot of the class is devoted specifically to a poem that isn't a dream vision as such, unlike a lot of these, but is regarded as sort of Chaucer's other great masterpiece and his only actually really finished. Canterbury Tales isn't finished. This is only sort of really finished masterpiece, Troilus and Cressida. So we'll be spending, I think, 5 or 6 weeks on that. 6 weeks, it looks like, on that, as well as reading the whole thing, as well as Il Filostrato, which is which we'll read in translation, the Italian work that Chaucer more translated / expanded / reworked to make Troilus and Cressida. We will be reading all of this in Middle English. You do not need any prior training in that. We will teach you how to read Middle English. It's not really that hard, especially Chaucer's late Middle English. And it looks a little formidable at first glance, but you'll get used to it very quickly.
Yeah.
And so we'll be looking at these various works of Chaucer, various other sources as well, not just Filostrato, to try and understand what Chaucer was doing as a poet, where he was coming from, how he was developing, what sources he was drawing on, and all that sort of good stuff. And I would say, just as an extra little note, if you're a Tolkien fan, this is a good year to take this class, since we've just recently published Tolkien's Lost Chaucer, a book on Tolkien's, in the event, abortive and never finished, like so much Tolkien stuff, and like the Canterbury Tales, attempt to write a student edition of selections from Chaucer's prose and poetry. And obviously quite a few of the things we'll be reading in this class are things that would have appeared in Tolkien's Chaucer edition if you had ever completed it.
Yeah, good, excellent. And so, yeah, I have to emphasize that students that are a little intimidated by reading the Middle English, but are attracted to the whole world of tales, this is a great place to start. And a lot of it is just having the courage to just read it out loud in whatever kind of accent you want to approximate, and the words will generally come. You have to do a bit of work on vocab sometimes, but it's amazing. So I'm in a very small community in the East Coast of Canada. We have a very particular sort of Irish, Scottish accent. Works pretty well, actually, when I make fun of my neighbors in reading Chaucer. And that's how I just got over that kind of initial fear, and then you can get a little bit more serious. Did I just lead our students astray, or is that a fair courage?
No, reading aloud is really, that can really, you all of a sudden you see things that are in sort of these sort of slightly strange looking medieval spellings, and then you try and say it out loud, and you go, oh, that's it's just this word that I already know, but in a slightly different form. I will be using the Riverside Chaucer for this, which is very friendly. It has a lot of little helpful glosses and things like that for some of the less familiar vocabulary that's in there.
Good, yeah, and room for notes too, or at least my giant. It's actually bigger. I could have used that to hold up my microphone. Actually, that would have been a
Yeah,
good.
it's quite a. It's a. I've got the hardback version of it, which is.
So, yeah, same.
You can brain somebody with this.
Yes, that's right. Although my little picture has been faded, it was set next to a window, so it's kind of yellow, a picture on the front there. So nice. Okay, if you have questions for this class, the only question is, so if students want to sign up, maybe they're not sure, where to start. Can they start either semester, or do they need Chaucer I to go into the Canterbury Tales class?
I'm actually not 100% sure. I would assume that you could come into the Canterbury Tales, but I may have just said something wrong there. So
yeah, that's fine. You don't have to wait for Chaucer I to come round again if you can't do it this time. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah, good.
That's what I thought. I just wasn't.
Yeah, and another couple students have come on and said that they did, one just took Chaucer II, and then one did them in the reverse order. That's great. I mean, I think it's such a wealth. I mean, Troilus and Cressida is just such a important book in our Western legendarium, so to speak, right? So I think it's a great opportunity. Beautiful. Now you can. I tried reading Middle English out loud, just kind of faking it until it started to fit. I tried that with Eddic Poetry in the original, Carl. I actually was a little less successful, shockingly, than you might think, but it is something I've loved, and there was a new Canadian edition. Canadian poet did a version that I quite liked, and so why don't you give us a sense of the class that you have coming up, Eddic Poetry in this is an important distinction, in Old Norse, not in poetic. Right. So yeah.
Old Norse will be a little bit further away from Middle English, despite what some have said. But it's manageable if you've had a little bit of background. And this course is conceived of as a follow-up to Signum's Introduction to Old Norse course, which has been running successfully for a number of years. We've had Eddic Poetry, the course before. In contrast to many kinds of ancient and medieval literature, we are blessed or cursed with an abundance of Old Norse literature. And I talk with my colleague at Signum, Paul Peterson, and with Nelson. There's just so many reading thing in Old Norse courses we could do and might try to sneak through in the future. But for the moment, we have Eddic Poetry and Old Norse, which itself only just scratches the surface of Eddic Poetry. But we try to take a view of a few different things. So certainly, like I say, Old Norse literature is very rich. Even if we focus just on Eddic Poetry, that's very rich. It does help if you've taken our introduction course, but we welcome interest from students who have a little bit of background in Old Norse from elsewhere, or perhaps even modern Icelandic, and you can get in touch with Signum, who will put you in touch with me or Paul, and we'll see if it looks like you're all set to go. If you are all set to go, we go through 4 whole poems essentially from the Eddic or para-Eddic catalog. Again, for the Tolkien connection, we start with what's known in English as the Battle of the Goths and the Huns, which comes out of a saga which Chris Tolkien edited back in 1960, I think, is when it was published. We actually used partially Chris Tolkien's edition of the prose, and we got a more recent version of the edition of the poetry. The prose kind of stitches it together in between the verses. It's in some ways a very archaic poem. It has some very archaic elements in it going back many centuries before it was actually preserved and written down. All of our writing here is essentially from the 13th century. But it's an interesting and fun introduction to the corpus. That's one of our pieces on heroic legend. Heroic legend is people behaving badly as opposed to mythology, which is gods behaving badly usually. So we've got the Battle of the Goths and the Huns there. Then we go and we do the Lay of Fafnir. Fafnir is the dragon, or really a giant or a dwarf or some kind of creature transformed into a dragon, who is part of the Volsung legends. In this poem, he's just been actually mortally wounded, but not before he spends a whole poem conversing with his killer, the hero Sigurður. And there's a lot of back and forth between them, with insults and asides and implications, as you might expect, between two heroic figures, one of whom has just killed the other. So we go through that. A lot of that has interesting back and forth and riddles, which will also be familiar in some ways to Tolkien fans. Tolkien was definitely inspired by not just certain things in the Battle of the Goths and the Huns, edited by his son, and also definitely inspired by riddling dragons in the Lay of Fafnir. Now we switched over to towards mythology, and we get the Lay of Grimnir, and we're using an edition prepared by our own Nelson Goring. So it's all very interconnected here at Signum. So we're going to be reading that. That's the god Odin, basically expounding, I think, on various bits of mythological wisdom and secret knowledge and so forth. I think that's probably a not wholly unreasonable characterization, Nelson. Yeah.
Good.
And then we finish up our big pieces with the Prophecy of the Cirrus, also known as Völuspá, which is the big Norse mythological poem. It kind of covers the whole stretch of Norse mythology from the beginning of the world to the end of the world and a little bit beyond. So we get a nice overview. We get our heroic legends, our archaic heroic legends. We get dragons. We get weird mythological wisdom. We get cosmological drama. And we do finish up with a little bit of taste of some things, other things that we could do. We look a little bit at the complications of skaldic verse, which are kind of more deliberately obscure and advanced. And we also look a little bit at Eddic verse in runic inscriptions, just to take a different view than people usually do in Eddic poetry. We've thought about doing a whole runic inscriptions course in the future. Will be about that. But overall, what's great about this course, it's a great way to carry on with your language if you've already got a bit of Old Norse. It's looks at a few nice different pieces. It's not going to be all the same. You're going to get very different kinds of stories, very different kinds of attitudes, very different kinds of characters in the different poems. But it gives you a good launching point for further reading on your own or with us in further courses. So
yeah, beautiful, gorgeous. And notice the different editions too that Carl just talked about that are within that. Someone, excuse me, asked about that poet. It's just Jeremy Dodds. It's a Canadian contemporary poet, and he just has a way of kind of evoking the world by giving his own poetic movement. All right, so we've got maybe 6 or 7 minutes left before we're going to close this up, and we'll actually have to say goodbye to Sarah a few minutes before that. So we're going to take your last questions about the class for our folks. We've got specialty classes in Old Norse and Poetic Edda. We've got Chaucer, this kind of deep dive. We've got then Blast Behind and Within the Worlds of Tolkien with John, Garth, and Sarah and the team. And then we also have this Folkloric Transformation, which also reaches back. We begin with that kind of folklore world, which is invisible, textually speaking, is not in extent, and move it forward to extremely contemporary pop culture expressions, and then the literature and film in between. So I'll take your questions now for the panel, and the panel, of course, can raise a hand if they happen to have one for one another. But I want to read one here. Excited to take, Scott Hodgman says, excited to take the Worlds of J.R.R. Tolkien, more so after hearing John's thoughts here of what to expect. The theme of method and theory and good research practice grabbed my attention. One of the multiple reasons I signed up for the course. Question. Do you see themes in theory and method unfolding in context with each chapter as part of that week's lecturing, or will we see method sort of treated transcontextually as a general theme throughout the course?
Pardon? I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm sorry. I am going to. We will be interleaving the.
Yes. Okay. I think
the analysis of Tolkien's inspirations with literary critical discussion or discussion of method that's pertinent as and when it comes.
Good. Yeah. No, I think that actually captures the spirit of the question, if not the specifics. But of course, you know, he's signed up. He gets to ask you all the great hard questions on the first day, right? Like, this is the beauty of it. Is it's a live class, and so it'll be dynamic and moving. And Sarah, what would you have? If students were to pre-read something just for fun, kind of going into it, is there something that you would suggest, or something to watch, or an atlas to pull off the shelf? Like, what would you have students do to get into the feeling of that course?
Okay, well, first of all, I would hope that any student starting the course has already got a decent background of Tolkien's own works. There are certain ones that we're requiring for the course, but here's one that some people may not have read yet, and if not this one, I would highly recommend, and that is The Lays of Beleriand. That one you need to read. So if you haven't read that one yet, get on that one before the course starts. And perhaps another one that I would recommend would be, this is something else that's on the reading list, would be Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Particularly the first chapter, and that is bringing in something that John will bring in some of his classes will be about eco-criticism. So looking at the way in which Tolkien was engaging with the landscape, and then perceiving that from a critical point of view as well. So something like that, I think, will give a really decent background. So that's just two that you could be reading to give yourself a nice little taster before you start the course.
Oh, nice. I just finished Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, and then I'm reading Aldo Leopold's Sand County Diaries, I think. So Rachel Carson's Silent Spring is sort of my later fall kind of version. I've got this little thread of trying to connect in that way, especially as I'm often trapped this season, you know, in small spaces. So I've been trying to get out. I mean, hence John's book in front of me. Sand County Almanac, thank you, not Sand County Diaries, Nelson. Thank you. Yeah. So thank you. That's great. I have a couple other notes here as well. Eco-criticism sounds great, says Gabriel. He's quitting his job and signing up for the course. And then we have Scott says, thanks for the in context. You captured kind of what he wanted to know about the way that method would work. I think it's one thing to know, students in general, is that we tend to be doing method as we are both lecturing and precepting small discussions. And so always be watching the way we model, and not just don't watch the misdirection and look just at the things that we're studying. We tend to be trying in our own limited ways to say, this is good reading, this is good research, this is good scholarship, this is good friendship with the past or text, this is good challenging of the past and text, right? Is that a fair comment, folks? I think that, you know, captures.
Oh, that's very much within the preceptor sessions. That's something that we deep dive into in the preceptor sessions, particularly. Yeah. And on that note, Brenton, I have to say goodbye, I'm afraid.
Thanks, yeah, and we're going to wind up here in a couple minutes. So last chance to get your questions or comments in here. Troilus and Cressida, Bronwyn writes this. Troilus and Cressida sounds like Trials and Crusades. Can we take that as a preview of the tales covered in Chaucer I? So Trials and Crusades, does that capture the feeling of the class?
I mean, the trials in the sense of trials and tribulations, I would say very much so. Certainly in Troilus and Cressida. Probably not so very much crusading, really. It's I mean, good fun. I mean, Troilus and Cressida, I don't think I really did say what it was about, but yet it's a love story set during the siege of Troy. So it's set in the distant past, but has, you know, there's the sort of the war and the siege is very much a dominating feel, and then trying to sort of a very tragic love story that plays out from woe to well and back to woe.
Yeah, and it does seem like a background and like the geography and physicality and space that John's bringing to our attention may sit at the back of a lot, if we can use our imaginations, a lot of what we're studying this semester. Okay, last question, super quick, starting with Carl. If students were to kind of read or watch something just kind of to warm up to the class, what's something that you would read or watch? We'll do Carl and then Maggie, Nelson, and John. Okay.
That's a good question. Besides Old Norse, there's a good general introduction overview of the kind of whole vibe and world and context of Norse myth and legend, which is done by Carolyn Larrington. That's a book that we also use in some of Signum's courses where we look at Old Norse literature in translation. And that's a good overview. It will give you kind of a background and vibe to what's going on in some of the different poems that we'll be reading. So I think that would be my first. Perfect. That's great. Thought.
Yeah, Maggie, what do you think? Or maybe we should spend some time talking about this. What would something? I reread Frankenstein, and I listened to it by audio just to get into that whole kind of romantic context. What's something that students could do, or maybe that's the right thing to say, yeah, kind of warming up to the course?
I think I'd just start with one of the texts. I mean, which one strikes your fancy the most, and dive in. Even if it's one you've already read, I always think going back and looking at it through new eyes is worth it. So, if it's Dracula or Interview with the Vampire, something you might be sideways familiar with because of the film or anything else, dig into that, but look at it with a slightly crisper set of eyes, saying, ooh, what's beneath this? What inspired this? And start to just engage that part of your brain as we dig into it over the course.
Yeah, and I reread Interview with a Vampire just simply because, I can't read a book a week in the middle of a term, so yeah, thank you, Carl. All right, Nelson and then John, just quickly. Yeah.
I mean, I think if you're thinking about taking Chaucer, I'd say start trying to read a little bit of Chaucer. Either find a translation. There are quite a few translations bouncing around. I think there's quite a few you can just find on the internet if you don't want to have a copy around the house or can't get to the library. And just start reading it. If you're a Tolkien fan, reading Tolkien's Lost Chaucer is a good way to get in, I think, as well, and start to learn a little bit about what he's all about.
Yeah, and John, Sarah mentioned Lays of Beleriand. Yeah, and you don't want to rush that one, right? Like that's a great one to kind of trickle through the, you don't want to read that in just a couple days leading up to a lecture.
Actually, a great one to read aloud to yourself.
Yeah, good. Yeah, would that be the one that you recommend, or do you have another kind of?
Yeah, maybe I would just take a quick check of your own strengths and weaknesses. Look at the reading list. And consider, we want to look at what Tolkien wrote, what his life was like. If you haven't read a biography, read a biography. If you feel really at sea with his context, his cultural context, there's a stack of books on the suggested or recommended end of the reading list that you could pick and choose from about folklore, about landscape, books about maps in creative world building as well. Lovely looking books if you fancy just dipping into a beautiful book. Look at the writer's map.
Yeah, beautiful, nice, excellent. Yeah, and I love I actually, when you had said maps, I actually looked up because I have a stack of books where I'm kind of going through the maps just above my desk here, where they have maps kind of on the inside or special atlases. So that would be where I would go. All right, well, thank you everyone. So thank you to Sarah and to Carl, who had to go to meetings now. Thank you, Maggie, Nelson, John, for your time and for your teacherliness, for you're willing to kind of open the digital doors, but also kind of take the risk of being a great teacher and open up this material for the world. So everyone, there's still time to sign up for each of these courses, and always reach out to one of us if you have any questions. We'll make sure that you can talk to a Signum advisor to make your choices well. Read well and enjoy the rest of the summer as we move towards the fall. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.